What if I told you that Ford built an engine so devastating, so absolutely terrifying, that they were forced to bury it alive? I'm talking about the legendary 427 single overhead cam, the Cammer, an engine so powerful that Ford's own executives called it too dangerous for the streets. While they fed you the 390 FE as their mainstream muscle, behind closed doors, they were hiding a monster that could have rewritten automotive history. By the end of this video, you'll understand the shocking truth about Ford's greatest cover-up. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Welcome to the 1960s, the golden age of the muscle car Cold War. Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler were locked in a brutal horsepower battle that would define American automotive culture forever. Every manufacturer was scrambling to build the most powerful, most dominant engine on the planet. Ford's answer to this war was supposed to be the 390 FE, a solid, reliable big block that pumped out respectable numbers. With 390 cubic inches and anywhere from 335 to 425 horsepower, depending on the tune, the FE was Ford's workhorse in Mustangs, Galaxies, and Thunderbirds. The 390 FE had earned its stripes in the trenches. It powered Ford's NASCAR victories, dominated drag strips across America, and gave millions of gearheads their first taste of serious horsepower. Ford marketed it heavily, plastered it on magazine covers, and made it the face of their performance division. Dealerships couldn't keep 390-powered cars on the lot. The public loved it, the press praised it, and Ford's accountants were counting massive profits. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. While Ford was marketing the 390 FE as their flagship performance engine, deep in the secret engineering bunkers of Dearborn, a team of mad scientists was working on something that would make every other engine look like a toy. Corporate executives were breathing down their necks, demanding something that could not just compete with, but absolutely obliterate the competition. The pressure was immense. Chevrolet had their big blocks, Chrysler had their HEMIS, and Ford needed a weapon of mass destruction. The project was so classified that most Ford employees didn't even know it existed. Codenamed internally as the Special High Performance Engine, only a handful of engineers had access to the development facility. Security was tighter than a government installation. Why all the secrecy for just another engine? What happened next would shake the automotive world to its core and create a conspiracy that lasts to this day. The numbers Ford tried to hide will blow your mind. While the 390 FE was putting out a respectable 335 to 425 horsepower, the 427 single overhead cam was producing an absolutely insane 616 horsepower in its mildest tune. But that's just the beginning of this technical masterpiece that Ford desperately wanted to keep secret. The Cammer featured revolutionary single overhead cam technology that was decades ahead of its time. While the 390 FE used traditional pushrod valve actuation, limiting it to around 6,000 RPM, the 427 SOHC could scream to 7,000 RPM and beyond without breaking a sweat. The breathing capacity was unlike anything Detroit had ever seen. Those massive valves and sophisticated cam profiles allowed this beast to inhale air and fuel like a hurricane. Here's where it gets truly sinister. Ford's engineers didn't just build a better engine, they built an engine from the future. The 427 SOHC featured aluminum timing covers, forged steel crankshafts, and cylinder heads with port designs that wouldn't look out of place in a Formula One car. The compression ratios were adjustable from a streetable 10.5 to 1 all the way up to a race-ready 12.5 to 1. Each engine was essentially hand-built by master craftsmen who signed confidentiality agreements. The weight difference told the real story. While the 390 FE tipped the scales at around 650 pounds, the advanced 427 SOHC weighed in at just 675 pounds, practically identical. Ford had managed to nearly double the horsepower while adding almost no weight penalty. The torque curve was flat from 3,000 to 7,000 RPM, creating a power band that made other engines look prehistoric. Here's the smoking gun they buried. Dyno sheets from Ford's secret testing facility showed the 427 SOHC making over 650 horsepower in race trim. To put that in perspective, that's more power than most modern supercars. The torque figures were equally terrifying. Enough twist to rip the drivetrain out of any production car of the era. Ford engineers had created something so advanced, so brutally powerful, that it made their own 390 FE look like a lawnmower engine. They had built the ultimate muscle car engine, and then something sinister happened. But Ford wasn't the only one with secrets, and their competitors weren't sitting idle. What happened next reads like a Cold War thriller, except the battlefield was Detroit and the prize was automotive supremacy. General Motors and Chrysler had caught wind of Ford's classified project, and they were desperate to learn what was happening behind those locked doors in Dearborn. Industrial spies began infiltrating Ford's engineering teams. Former employees were approached with briefcases full of cash in exchange for blueprints, specifications, and dyno data. Security cameras at Ford facilities recorded mysterious break-ins where nothing appeared stolen, but classified documents had clearly been photographed. Phone lines were tapped, engineers were followed, and hotel rooms were searched when Ford personnel traveled to racing events. The most shocking revelation came from a leaked CIA document decades later. Government agencies were actually monitoring the entire muscle car arms race, concerned that civilian automotive technology was advancing faster than military applications. Federal agents were embedded within all three manufacturers, ostensibly for national security purposes. Chrysler executives reportedly flew to Switzerland for secret meetings with European contacts who claimed to have obtained 427 SOHC blueprints. General Motors hired private investigators to stake out Ford's testing facilities, using telephoto lenses to photograph prototype engines during dyno sessions. The competition wasn't just trying to build better engines, they were systematically stealing Ford's most classified secrets. When Ford discovered the extent of this industrial warfare, their paranoia reached fever pitch. But their response to this espionage would shock even the spies themselves. Here's where the story gets dark, and Ford's corporate machine went into full damage control mode. Just as the 427 SOHC was ready to dominate every racetrack and street in America, Ford mysteriously pulled the plug. They claimed it was too expensive to produce and not suitable for street use. But leaked internal documents tell a very different story. The truth is that Ford's own executives were terrified of what they had created. Insurance companies were already circling like vultures, threatening to blacklist any manufacturer who put this kind of power in production cars. NASCAR officials had caught wind of the camera's capabilities and were preparing to ban it before it could humiliate every other engine on the track. The competition was panicking. Chevrolet and Chrysler executives were reportedly making desperate phone calls to Ford, begging them not to unleash this monster. But here's the real conspiracy. Ford's board of directors made a calculated decision to sacrifice the 427 SOHC to protect their mainstream business. They were making massive profits selling 390 FE engines to the masses, and they couldn't risk a public relations disaster if their superweapon started killing people on the streets. So they buried the camera, limited production to barely 200 units, and pushed the safe 390 FE as their performance flagship. Was this really about safety, or was Ford protecting something much more valuable, their corporate empire? When the beast occasionally escaped its cage, the results were absolutely devastating. The few 427 SOHC engines that made it to the racetrack didn't just win, they obliterated the competition so thoroughly that other manufacturers demanded rule changes. In the limited drag racing applications where it was allowed, the Cammer set records that stood for decades. Professional drivers who got behind the wheel described it as driving a controlled explosion. The engine's ability to maintain power at high RPM was unlike anything else in existence. While other big blocks would gasp for air above 6,000 RPM, the SOHC was just getting started. International racing circuits saw glimpses of what could have been. European teams that managed to acquire these engines dominated events until sanctioning bodies stepped in with convenient rule changes. The wins are there in the record books, but Ford has never celebrated them publicly. Here's what they really don't want you to know. Privateers who somehow acquired 427 SOHC engines were quietly contacted by Ford representatives and encouraged to switch to other power plants. Some received financial incentives, others faced legal pressure about engine modifications and warranty issues. The racing legacy exists, but it's been systematically suppressed. Modern NASCAR historians rarely mention the brief period when the camera was legal, because those few races showed just how outclassed every other engine really was. The 390 FE had respectable racing success, but it was always fighting with one hand tied behind its back. Today, the conspiracy continues, and the evidence is hiding in plain sight. While a decent 390 FE engine might cost you $5,000 to $10,000, a genuine 427 SOHC will set you back over $100,000, if you can even find one. That price difference tells you everything about what Ford really created. Modern Ford engineers still study those buried blueprints. The current Coyote V8 engines in today's Mustangs use overhead cam technology that traces directly back to the Camry project. Ford learned from their mistake. They're giving you advanced technology now, but in carefully controlled doses that won't threaten their corporate structure. The restoration community knows the truth. Finding original 427 SOHC parts is like hunting for treasure because Ford destroyed most of the tooling and documentation. The few survivors are treated like automotive holy grails, hidden away in private collections and climate-controlled garages. Here's the smoking gun. Ford's current performance division has the complete engineering data to build a modern version of the 427 SOHC that would embarrass every supercar on the planet. They have the technology, they have the knowledge, but they'll never do it. Why? Because they learned their lesson in the 1960s about building something too powerful for the corporate machine to handle. What today's engineers learned from those buried blueprints is being carefully rationed out, one generation at a time. So there you have it, the truth about Ford's greatest conspiracy. While they sold millions of 390 FE engines to the unsuspecting public, they buried the most advanced power plant of the muscle car era because it was simply too dangerous for their corporate empire. The 427 single overhead cam wasn't just an engine, it was a revolution that Ford decided the world wasn't ready for. They chose profits over performance, safety over supremacy, and corporate survival over automotive evolution. The 390 FE became their public face, while the Camry became their darkest secret. Now you know what they didn't want you to know. You understand why finding a 427 SOHC today costs more than most people's houses. You've seen the evidence of corporate suppression that continues to this day, but this is just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button right now if you want more automotive secrets they're trying to hide. Ring that notification bell because next week, I'm exposing the real reason General Motors killed the L88 Corvette engine. And trust me, it's not what you think. The comment section is yours. Tell me what other automotive conspiracies you want me to investigate. Because in the world of muscle cars, the most dangerous engine isn't always the one they sell you. Sometimes the real monster is the one they're desperately trying to keep buried. The truth is out there, and we're going to find it together.